Recording in progress.
Hi, this is Kathy Beckett, Ward 3. I was having trouble hearing you, so I had my hand raised. I'm not sure what the problem was, but so I'm here for a couple of reasons. One is to just remind the board that there was a vote 2 months ago where 56% of those who voted on the article around the school resource officer position voted to discontinue that program. And also would like to note that there are 2 new board members who have not voted on the issue. So that's just, and so I'm looking forward to finding out knowing when the board will take up a vote on the school resource officer program. So I'm also going to would like to note that despite the school vote, the attorney for the school district contends that the school board alone can make the decision to discontinue the program. If it is true that the board has the authority, it does not mean that the board should not listen to the community. Further, the attorney states that the issue of the SRO is an issue of safety. However, there is one SRO for Lebanon's 4 schools. It is foolish to think that an SRO's presence is what will make Lebanon's schools safe, particularly since the real safety issue for our students, as shown by the district's recent equity audit, is the marginalization of some of Lebanon's kids. Our teachers, administrators, and other staff, as well as students themselves, contribute to the safety of our schools. A concerted effort to focus on and to support those key assets of the school community is the better way. There are 505 public schools in the state of New Hampshire and 101 school resource officers. According to those statistics and assertions that SROs are necessary for school safety, 4 out of 5 schools in the state of New Hampshire are unsafe at any particular time. Is this true? Of course not. You board members have heard moral, thoughtful, and factual reasons to discontinue the SRO program from social workers, parents, and legal experts. You have a responsibility to listen to those voices of reason and truth and to the collective voices of Lebanon's voters. It is my belief that you have a responsibility to discontinue the SRO program. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me because I cannot understand you. I could hear Kathy loud and clear, but when you speak, it's intermittent and garbled, and I don't know what you're saying. Can you hear me now? Can you nod or make a sign if you're hearing me? Okay, I can hear you now, so maybe they've fixed something. My name's Amelia Serene, and I live in Ward 2, and I have spoken before this board before, and I really don't have anything new to say. I continue to be puzzled about why you continue to have the school resource officer. We do not need a gun in the school. We do need resources, and paying for an armed officer is a very ineffectual way to do it. An officer is not a trained social worker. An officer is not a trained teacher. And we are paying for the gun, which we all believe we don't need a gun in the school. And evidence and studies, and one of which I sent you last time, had a heartfelt description of the fact that putting a gun in the school actually increases the danger. I won't take you any further time. I hope things can be corrected so I can listen to the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Regular police contact, even if this contact is in passing, affects how Black and Latina students perceive themselves, their school, and law enforcement. Trauma and anxiety symptoms can increase with the frequency of police contact, regardless of where that contact occurs. For many students of color, police presence in schools can cause re-traumatization given their negative experiences with. The Brookings Institution published a national report last April with the following conclusions. Rates of youth violence were plummeting, independent of law enforcement interventions. The presence of law enforcement in American schools during an era of rapidly declining juvenile crime diverts precious resources from prevention and support services, increases the likelihood of deeper engagement in the justice system, and exacerbates existing racial disparities. What is it going to take to move us to change? Will all the best practices literature in the world move us? Or will we wait until we finally become aware of the tragedies born of the damage and the trauma that we've been sowing for years? And even then, would we change? Or would we just look for any possible explanation other than the elephant in the room? It takes vision and humility to achieve meaningful change in this world, and I know that we can find that within ourselves. Portland, Maine recently removed the SROs from their district. They're reinvesting the budget savings in restorative practices and trauma-informed support services. There are so many effective alternatives to school policing, alternatives that can build learning environments that work for everyone. Our community has the skills and the knowledge to chart that new and better course forward. So I'm going to leave you with the words of the Portland superintendent who courageously supported his district's decision. In this moment of reckoning, are we more than just an institution? Are we living our commitment to equity? Thank you. Good night.
There's another person. Hang on.
Okay.
Miriam?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Miriam Ashton. I'm a resident in Ward 2. Thanks for giving me time to address the board. I would also like to urge the board to end the SRO position. As the previous speaker mentioned, at this point, we know that there are students who are being negatively impacted by police presence, whether that's by way of any actual discipline or surveillance that's happening, or if it's a feeling of lack of psychological safety that's happening at school. Whatever it is, it's not okay. And it's especially not okay when those students who are most likely to have negative interactions with the police are students of lower economic status, students of color, students with disabilities, and trans and queer students. So I think the question I have is, does the board consider those students' experiences at school important? And do they matter just as much as the students who don't mind having police in schools? That seems like an obvious answer to me, that yes, of course it matters, and the board can do something about it, even if it goes against the status quo, even if the Lebanon Police Department or the city doesn't like it, it's the right thing to do. More effective resources that students need right now, which I know you all know much better than I do, and different kinds of support rules that can be there for all students without the implications that come with a badge and a gun. Thank you.
There's two more.
All right.
Margaret?
Sorry, I was muted. My name is Margaret Campbell. I'm in West Lebanon. I'm a retired school counselor. Thank you for your time. I will be very brief. I would just point out, and I'm happy to send this research article to the board if they would like to see a research study done by a professor at the University of Delaware in 2020 that said there is no conclusive evidence that SROs reduce crime among students or prevent mass shootings. The other thing I would just say is that I have heard and seen that one of the roles of the SRO is to educate, to counsel, to be a mentor. And I think there are other kinds of positions that are more effective in counseling or educating or being a mentor. Teachers, coaches, social workers, counselors. I don't think the person filling this role has any background in counseling or teacher education. Thank you for your time.
Diane?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Diane Root, I live in Ward 1, and I'm not going to belabor points that have already been very well made by other people. You'll be relieved to hear that. I do want to urge the school board to please act soon to end the SRO position, as the voters have suggested, more than suggested, voted. Again, if mentoring is the goal, there are other more trained and qualified staff to do that. Subjects listed in the job description for the SRO don't really seem like a police function. They seem like, again, there are other people who would fill those roles more sensibly. Police presence tends to increase the likelihood that student misconduct is referred to the justice system instead of being dealt with within the disciplinary framework of the school, and that happens disproportionately to kids who are part of a vulnerable population. I'm going to stop there. You've heard this, and you may well hear some of it again, but I just urge you to act soon to end this position. Thank you very much.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
All right, we do have one other public comment that was sent to us in written format. And MJ, would you please read that on behalf of the sender who can't be here?
Sure. My name is Tammy Began, and I live in Ward 1. As a former board member and mother of 2 boys recently out of high school, I respectfully ask that each board member consider my input. I heard the SRO is back on the agenda, and I have to wonder why. The board took months to consider this topic just last year with hours and hours of input. The board voted to retain the position. The board has far more things to do than reconsider every vote from a previous year that didn't go the way some wanted it to. Why can't the vote just be accepted by all and given the chance to work? The board approved a new social worker position, which was one of the main arguments from some of the activists that didn't want the SRO. Why not give the 2 positions a chance to work together? I'm not sure if all you are aware of the origin of the sexual misconduct incidents involving the assistant coach from Colby Sawyer. After the first complaint, it imploded with girl after girl coming forward. Did you know the first female reported such misconduct to her SRO, not her parents, not her friends, not her teachers, not the nurse, not the social worker? She reported it to the SRO. Imagine if she never did. If your reason for reconsidering this position is because of the number of votes to reconsider it, please also take into account the number of voters that actually voted. If I remember correctly, it was like 14% of the voters that voted that day. That might tell me that 86% of people are leaving this decision to the proper people to make such decision. That would be you. So thinking the majority of our voters want it removed would not be an accurate assumption. Please do not consider statistics that were not statistics for our school. They were repeated time and time again last year when considering this, and never were they applicable to our district. Please also be aware that schools and departments which have in recent past removed the SRO and or defunded the police are now scrambling as violence has increased and they don't have the means to combat it. Burlington, Vermont is an example of this. Please do not minimize the role by saying we do not need a cop with guns in schools. The role is so much more than that. We heard time and again, most in non-public section, that times the SRO was asked for and needed who is going to fulfill the duties of the SRO provides. You all know that a teacher, social worker, or principal should not be put in some of those positions. I would imagine it would be a liability for the district if a teacher, social worker, or the principal had to handle some of the situations the SRO does. For each student that doesn't feel comfortable with the SRO in their school, there's a student that is more comfortable with the SRO in their school. Why does one student outweigh the other? Why avoid the issue rather than work through it? Give the new social worker a chance to further improve our district. One of the other things I've heard said in support of removing the SRO position is that the reason we agreed to the SRO position years ago, alcohol, drugs, fighting, are no longer relevant to our district. However, could it be that such situations are no longer relevant because of the SRO? The position is fulfilling its intended goal. That is why those issues no longer exist. I will note that the high school had a nasty girl fight this year that was recorded and then posted on social media. It is the SRO with their expertise that would investigate and get the video removed. Please recognize the benefit of the role, which includes the flexibility of it. The district signs a new statement of work every year or maybe every other that describes the duties. This is such a good thing and gives you the ability to expand it to cover new topics, location, social media, bullying, etc. The final thing I will mention is that not all police officers are good at handling children, and I do mean that. Some of you may have had experience, either yourself or a family member, dealing with police and know this is true. The SRO is a unique position for a unique officer. They go through extensive training to know how to react, what to say, what not to say, etc. Although my boys are no longer there, if they were and needed to confide in an officer for whatever reason, I would very much appreciate having someone trained to receive such information and complaint. That can make a world of difference. If you are truly going to reconsider it, you need to do it properly with input from the appropriate administrators. That is what was done last year, and the vote was made to retain the position. I would also think, given the regular attendance from the student rep, that they might have the option of weighing in again if they so choose. Please do not rely on input received from last year from various groups, as we later learned that the ones who spoke on behalf of these groups were not speaking for the majority. Thank you.
And thanks for reading that, MJ. Is there any other public comment? Not hearing any. The public comment period is closed. We'll proceed with the consent agenda.
I see someone's hand who already spoke, and I'm not quite sure, but I think I'll just
Okay, well,
unmute her and...
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I'm concerned about the long statement that was just read. I had read part of it. And she refers to...
I'm sorry, we're not going to, we can't have public debate during public comment.
I'm concerned about the non-public sessions that she refers to.
All right, go on.
Well, that's what I wanted to say. She refers to a lot of information in non-public sessions, and I think this information should be made public.
Okay, well, there are reasons defined by law that prevent us from discussing things. The things are discussed in non-public because they fit certain criteria, and we cannot discuss those in public without compromising people's privacy.
Yet you allowed her to discuss them.
Well, we can go back and parse the comment. I didn't hear any specific instances mentioned. I just heard a reference to a non-public information being made. In any event, thanks for that, and we'll take that into consideration as well.
Dick, do you want to do the correspondence before you do the consent agenda? Can you hear me? Hello? Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Lila. Let's do the correspondence report. Sorry.
That's okay. So for correspondence, we received 1 letter in favor of maintaining the position of the SRO, 2 in favor of discontinuing the position of SRO, and 1 with several procedural questions about public comment and appropriate public notice of meetings.
Thank you. And all of those, have those all been posted in the correspondence?
They're all available in the correspondence
Oh,
folder.
great, thank you. I know they came in very recently. Thanks. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. We need a motion, please, to approve the minutes from the public school board meeting on April 6th.
I'll make a motion to approve the public minutes from the meeting on Wednesday, April 6, 2022.
Motion by MJ, seconded by Renee. Are there any questions or corrections? MJ?
First, I think you were actually in attendance at that meeting. It said you were via phone.
Yeah, I wasn't away that long. Yeah, yeah, okay.
And then under 9C, I think we forgot the motion because I thought that the second reading of EEA-EAR was actually approved. And if I had to venture a guess, right, Kristen probably made the motion and I probably seconded it.
Sounds about right.
Oh, so it's just the action that's missing?
Correct.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, not hearing any other corrections. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to 0. The minutes are accepted. Need a motion to accept the non-public meeting minutes from April 6, 2022, please.
I'll make a motion to accept the non-public meeting minutes from April 6, 2022.
Moved by MJ, seconded by Stephen. Is there any comments or corrections? MJ?
So I think we just need to add the other members that were present. So I think that Joanne and was at the meeting that Jim was also in attendance.
Yeah, I'll include that.
Yeah, note that the superintendent and attorney Jim O'Shaughnessy. Was there anyone else?
I know that was it.
Tim Ball, were you in there?
Tim, were you there?
Yeah.
And Tim Ball.
I don't know if he was mentioned.
Okay, with that correction, all in favor? Unanimous. There are a list of nominations, renominations, so forth from the superintendent. We'll work our way through those. Let's first do the easiest one first. If we can get a motion to accept the nominations and resignations on the superintendent's spreadsheet dated April 27th.
I'll make a motion to accept the nominations and resignations on the spreadsheet dated April 27th, 2022.
Thank you. Motion by MJ, seconded by Renee. Are there any questions for the superintendent on any of these resignations and nominations?
Sorry, I just had one question for Joanne about the resignation for the counselor at MLS. Is that a position that's currently being searched for?
Yes, I saw the paperwork come through today, so we will have a nomination for that.
Oh, and the fourth grade teacher too.
Any other questions? Hearing none, vote all in favor. Unanimous.
So every year before we send out contracts, the list of continuing contracts comes through to the board. So we just need a motion to approve the 2022-2023 renominations for continuing contract LEA. You just read the very top of the columns on page 1.
This is the first 2 pages of that. That's a 2-page spreadsheet, beginning with Ackerman and ending with Zito.
Well, there's more pages
No,
than
yeah,
that.
I know, but for the continuing contracts.
they're all continuing contracts, they're just based on the years.
Right.
And we decided a year or two ago not to do it by page, but
Okay.
just to approve the continuing LEA contracts.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve the continuing LEA contracts as detailed on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-page spreadsheet provided by the superintendent.
So, okay. They're not all continuing, so when you did your count, did you just say we're doing the thirds and the fifths in there as well?
Well, Joanne, did we agree that we would do the all of these contracts at once, or do we need to break them out?
My understanding from Tim is that they are continuing, it's just what year that they're continuing on, so that we didn't need to do them by year 1, by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, but just one approving the continuing contract.
I would say you could make a motion to approve the certified staff as listed in the packet, because
Okay,
we're splitting hairs between whether you're in a third year or you're continuing as a term for the state. Continuing used to be 10 years. All of these teachers need to be approved with just what year they are, so you can just approve all the teachers and that'll take care of all 7 pages.
okay. I'll make a motion to approve the 2022-2023 renominations for the Lebanon School District of the qualified personnel on pages 1 through 8 of the spreadsheet.
Thank you. Motion by MJ, second by Stephen. Are there any questions? Okay, all in favor? Unanimous. Bear with me for a second here, folks. Okay, time for the student report. Miles.
Good evening. My name is Miles Sturgis. I'm the moderator of the Lebanon High School Council. I have a bit of an update on student life for you. There's just the Italy trip during April break. I was one of the students who went, and we all had an amazing time and are very appreciative of the opportunity. And students are also getting excited for the Greece trip next April. And as we approach the end of the school year, AP exams are starting next week, spring sports are ramping up, and you can really feel that end of year excitement at LHS. An update on council. Today we met with a group called New Futures, which is a sub-organization of Dartmouth-Hitchcock regarding substance misuse and suicide prevention, and how we can advertise those resources in LHS. Last night, LHS had an 8th grade parent night, and the Public Relations Committee of Council kindly put together a list of all co-curriculars offered at LHS, as well as descriptions of those, and we handed those out to almost all parents who attended. I also spoke a few minutes at the parent night last night to promote council and to ask the parents to promote council to their incoming freshman students. Lil, at the last meeting, you had asked about the number of students on council, which I said to be 21. That is correct. I neglected to say that there also are 2 voting staff members on council, and I just wanted to clarify that. And speaking of that, elections are currently underway for next year's council at LHS. The elections for freshmen from Plainfield and LMS will commence soon, and members of council will visit both schools to promote council and answer any questions that students may have. Next week, I will be attending the LHS staff meeting to promote the 2 staff positions on council and seek interest. The past 2 years, these positions have not been filled due to COVID, but we're hoping to start filling them again. This week, council co-sponsored Sexual Assault Awareness Week with another LHS co-curricular, the Young Progressive Activists. We had Denim Day today, which is to help combat victim blaming and educate others about sexual assault. Our council retreat we had last week, and it was a huge success. Lots of committees are doing many different things. We instituted some new procedures to improve efficiency of our council meetings, such as speakers lists and points, such as points of order or points of inquiry. Our fundraising committee is planning to purchase more LHS merchandise to aid in our fundraising efforts for next year. Our athletics and academics committee has reached out to the Lebanon High School Alumni Association to try to work on creating class reunions in the future. Other things we are currently planning are Springfest, the homecoming dance occurring next fall, the first to occur in many years at LHS, as well as planning future fundraising strategies and events. Thank you.
Any questions for Miles? Lil?
Thank you for the clarification, but also thank you as a parent and a board member. Thank you for the co-curricular packet of information. That was really thorough and super helpful for incoming parents, so we appreciate that.
Of course, you're welcome, and we plan to keep that updated in future years as well.
Can I just ask, what is Springfest?
So Springfest is basically just like spring carnival. So with different activities and events, it'll be about half of the day on Friday, June 3rd.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where did you get your shirt?
I don't remember. I think it was at Kohl's, I believe.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're going to start a new fashion trend.
Maybe.
Careful.
Never know.
Can I say?
I see a new dress code for the board coming.
I just want to say one more thing, that I think you've been a really fantastic student rep for student council, and you've been the most informative and professional. I mean, all the students have been great, but you're very informative in letting us know what's going on. So I think you've set a really good model for people to come after you. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Miles.
Thank you.
Can I just speak quickly?
Please do.
It's tough following Miles. So he's been very thorough, and so I just want to mention that, you know, we do meet. Council has been a 7-year project since I came. I think Miles and I work well together. There's good communication. I hope council believes that administration wants to elevate their presence, and we're working to do that. And I think we've come up with some good strategies implemented first last night. Last night was a good evening. It was an 8th grade parent night, a bit of a mix of what we traditionally do. A good turnout. I think there was some, genuine good feelings about being in the building. The counselors did a good job, and we were able to get some good information out to parents. So last night went well. I'm happy, Lil, to read. There's information that comes through our counselors, and I'm here to answer questions. I'm not here as much as Miles is, but geez, maybe I should be. But generally, he represents us well, and of course, we're always available. We have difficulty the way we're positioned at the high school in keeping a watch on that front door. That's it's the impetus behind primarily the renovation, is so we can have a better set of eyes on coming into the building. We have kids buzz in all day long. We have open campus for juniors and seniors, and so they're going in and out for lunch, especially so since COVID. And so we're constantly buzzing them in. The attendance officer isn't set up to identify them as they walk in the door, but we have a good set of eyes, generally speaking, on them. They don't have their cards, ever. We can count on a single hand the many times they're able to allow themselves in. So in working with Dana, we tried to come up with a way that we could do a better job. Our fob readers are now compatible with cell phones. Not everybody has a cell phone, but 95%, that's a guess. It seems like they all do. Students lose, misplace, and don't bother to find their cards even if they're on their person. Cell phones is an option that we will emphasize next year. We'll emphasize it at orientation. We'll emphasize it at the opening day assembly and advisories, et cetera. But student ID fobs will still remain in place, I think, and we're going to continue to talk to Tim about that. I don't see a way that they cannot. We're just looking for an opportunity for it to be a bit more convenient, instead of I'm constantly opening the doors also, and kind of messing with the system because you have to go through the phone in order to stop the buzzing. It's kind of a pain. So we're trying to become more efficient at the process of letting people in the building. The app allows, and this is important, the app allows for a single ID pass number to be assigned per phone. The door access software allows the ID number to be added to the student credentials. So whatever, we know who enters the building, who goes in and out based on the fobs that register with the, I don't know, the pad, I guess you'd say, on the side of the door. So the idea of handing out the ID numbers to multiple phones doesn't work. That's what I've been told, and Dana and I and Tim need to be crystal clear about that moving forward. But it's going to work in the same way that the fob cards do. Each kid is going to be assigned an individual number. Yeah, Dana emphasized that the access levels are the same as having a swipe card, and so essentially it's a duplicate of what the swipe card has traditionally done that no student ever has.
So just to clarify, the app is in addition, the plan is for it to be in addition to the swipe cards as another way of allowing kids to let themselves in and out of the building.
That's the way we always understood it, and if it wasn't that way, it will be. It has to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, moving on. New business. We have a, we're going to hear about the Lebanon High School trip to Iceland.
Hi, I'm Mary Wennick. I'm a science teacher at Lebanon High School, and I was the lead teacher on the trip. There were two other science teachers who also attended. This is Sadie Mielkars, and she is one of the students who went. I have a flyer to hand out to all of the board members.
I will talk while she is handing out the flyers. So I was signed up for the Iceland trip, or I was thinking about doing it since freshman year when they first announced it. And so I was pretty disappointed when they canceled it, and then it came back after COVID kind of lightened up. So it was very exciting to go to Iceland after getting that re-excitement, because I was like, I want to go to Iceland, I want to see the Northern Lights. Which I slept through. Boo. People did see them. I was asleep. There's pictures from the trip on the back, but it was the most fun I think I've ever had with a school trip related thing. I think probably the coolest part of the whole trip was that it felt like you were on a different planet sometimes. Just the landscape of the very flat land and then a giant jutting up mountain was so different from around here, where it's very hilly, and I thought it was super, I don't know, different and cool. And we had a great tour guide who was native to Iceland, and she was very helpful in explaining a lot of customs while we were on the bus, because we were on the bus for quite a long amount of time between activities at some points. So for those long amount of times, we weren't missing out on learning. She would explain naming customs, how children go to school, and other customs having to do with historical traditions and current traditions.
So just some of the highlights. So as Sadie said, only a few of us saw the Northern Lights. The first night we were there, we'd flown overnight. We got into Iceland in the morning. Most people didn't sleep on the plane. And we had a long day. We just went from the moment we landed. And then that evening after dinner, we said we were going to go out to look for the Northern Lights. It was the only night that we had the opportunity to see them, because it was cloudy the rest of the time. And even in this picture, I think you can see it's still cloudy, but they did peek through, and that's probably one of the better pictures we had. The learning experience, it was a STEM trip, so we did see some geothermal power plants, the geysers, and the
Lava Center?
Yeah, the Lava Center was, I didn't put a picture of the Lava Center. I had to put a picture of this first student because he didn't realize how kroners transferred to dollars, and the first thing he bought was this hat, and then he realized it was about $300. But fur is big there, and he had to call home, and his mom said, "Don't worry about it. You're experiencing something new. We'll just move on." So,
his name is Gavin.
Yeah, the hat had a name. He was our 21st student on the trip. And glaciers, a couple of the students who gave me some testimonials mentioned walking on the glaciers. So there was one day, the whiteout conditions, snow pelting at us. Once we got past that point, the glacier was pretty amazing. And then there's this glacier that took them a few years to dig into the earth so we could actually go into the glacier and see the different layers as it had formed. And it was kind of back in history. Anyway, lots of geological forms there that are very incredible and different from what students were used to. Anyway, I wanted to mention the company that the school uses, and we used it also for the Italy trip that Miles mentioned, and the Greece trip. They put safety at, the top of their list, and then student experiences. They're a great company that we're planning on doing another trip in 2024, hopefully, to go to. This time we're going to do turtles in Costa Rica, we're hoping. So. Anyway, I'll be back in a year.
Can you take any questions from the board?
Sure.
Anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
So I would like to know what the most interesting custom that you learned about was.
I don't remember.
Okay, I can answer the naming system. So I had heard of, we all know the last name ends in like Son, Johnson, or something like that. But in Iceland, the daughters take their father's first name and then it's Dottir. So they have a different last name than their father, than their brother, and their mother keeps her last name, which is her father's first name, and then Dottir also at the end. So that was pretty interesting. I'd heard the name, but I didn't know how it came about.
Iceland is one of the only countries that still keeps up that naming tradition, because a lot of other Scandinavian countries have dropped that in favor of more traditional, like father's last name carrying through the family.
And thank you for allowing us to do this opportunity. It was wonderful.
Well, thanks for the report. Sounds like a great time.
Yeah, it was. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is discussion and action, the MOU with Lebanon Police Department, School Resource Officer position. The City Manager, Sean Mulholland, is with us today, and I'm not sure, I know that we have him elsewhere in the agenda, I think, to talk about the Sem Hill building. But before we start this discussion, I wonder if, actually, the one right after the other. So Sean, if you'd like to make any comments?
Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. I just a couple of things. I did send a memo in regards to the budgetary impacts we just have to consider. If the school board chooses to eliminate the SRO position, we just need to deal with some revenue issues that would impact this year's city budget. We're on a calendar year, which obviously goes from January 1 to December. So that would result in a shortfall in this year's budget, and then of course there would be a shortfall in future budgets. But this budget, of course, is approved by the councils in effect, so we would have to raise additional funds to cover that. So I would just ask you to consider that piece of it. And we also had talked about possibly transferring the school crossing guard function, which is presently with the city, with the police department, over to the school district. That would help to reduce some of the impact on the city's budget by transferring that function over. It wouldn't cover the total loss, but it would cover about half of the loss of the city's budget if you chose to take that course of action.
Any questions for Mr. Mulholland? I think what I'm going to ask Sean is let's, for now, I know you have things to say about the Sem Hill building, but if you can stick around for a little bit longer, we won't combine the two. Are there questions, Mr. Mulholland, regarding the MOU or anything else? Go ahead, MJ.
So I have a question again, I guess, about the crossing guard thing. So by transferring it over, we would be responsible for finding the crossing guards, hiring them, and onboarding them, or how would that work?
I would suggest you take the existing staff that we have and we simply transfer them over to the school district. That would be up to you if you chose to do that, but of course you could go out and hire your own people, yes, onboard them and do those sorts of functions. Obviously there's going to be some sort of onboarding because you have a different structure than we do, in terms of your payroll system and how that works and your rules and your procedures that you have here. But yes, that would be your responsibility. That's why we talked about sometime, if you choose to take this course of action, sometime after January, which would allow that transition to occur. And we need to continue to provide support to you in terms of training, traffic control training. The police department can continue to do that. And also the support to get the appropriate garments, class 2 and 3 garments that are necessary for those folks to wear when they're on the roadway.
So as a follow-up, how many crossing guards are there, and have you had trouble recruiting and retaining crossing guards?
Most places have had great difficulty in doing that. We have not. We've been able to maintain our positions, but they tend to be elderly folks for the most part, and that may be challenging to fill that in the future, like everything else in the labor market. I don't know what the total number is of how many folks they have part-time working right now.
Go ahead, Renee.
So I have noticed that when the crossing guards are unavailable, Lebanon Police Department does step in. Would that change anything moving forward if they no longer fell under the city's budget and purview?
Yes, it would. It'd be the responsibility of the school district. You'd have to use your organic staff to be able to cover that.
Any other questions? Lil?
So how, I realize there would be a shortfall because of this budget year that you're in, because our budget years don't match. But then going forward for the next budget year, if this position was eliminated, then I'm assuming your budget would somehow, if you were going to continue to employ this person, it would compensate for it in some way. Is that what we were?
Right, so the school district provides $60,000 a year to help offset the SRO. It's about $28,000 a year for the crossing guards. So starting in January for us, we would have to make up the gap, which is what we would do in our budget for that next year. So that would offset that gap.
Right, but then the gap would not necessarily continue, because then at that point you could make a decision about whether you're keeping this like as part of your staff, right, going forward.
We would continue to maintain this position. The city's population is about to grow by 10% with all the new development, and we're going to have more and more demands on our police department.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, the discussion on this topic is now open. You want to have any observations to make, comments? Renee?
Well, I'll make a comment just based on knowledge from my career and what I do. So I know there's been a lot of comments about the SRO position and this school to prison pipeline and referring to more legal courses. In working with Lebanon Police Department in Grafton County, we run the juvenile diversion programs, and I can tell you that the Lebanon School District does not refer but maybe 2 a year to restorative practices because of issues. And I do know that the SRO position has been, instrumental and called upon by the staff to support kiddos that have suicidal ideations, fights in the locker rooms, TikTok videos that have gone viral, just a slew of things that have been going on. And so I don't want anyone to think that the crime, quote unquote, has decreased. I think that our SRO has done an amazing job to kind of mitigate a lot of that. So maybe we're not seeing it as widely as we had before, but I thought that was important to note.
Thank you. Lil?
So I think that as we had last year, as we've heard this year, the vote last year, the city vote was very, very close. The vote in the board was very close. The vote this year, the city vote, is more substantially demonstrative of what the city wants or what voters want. And I think that we have to address the issue, and I understand that this will cause budgetary changes, but this is the same group of people that we're talking about, right? It is the city voters who are voting. So I think we can make whatever decision that we want, but I think we have to go on record to say why we're making this decision and what we're doing, because it is clear from the information that we've gotten, there are compelling arguments on both sides. Reasonable people, thoughtful people can make completely different decisions based on these arguments, and that has happened here and that has happened in other places. But one of the arguments that we made last year was that the warrant article was so unclear, it was hard to know what voters were saying. I think that's no longer the case. And so they've asked us to make a decision. I think we have to, once again, make a decision and decide where we want to go. I personally, my stance has not changed since last year. I don't feel the need to continue the position, and I will continue to vote for dissolving it.
Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm torn. I don't know that there's an easy answer. And we've heard many people make really great arguments, very eloquently put, describing the effect of a police presence on marginalized populations in the district. And those are very valid arguments that we have to listen to. At the same time, we as a board also have the responsibility to speak for those voices that can't stand here and speak for themselves because of the issues that they have faced, and many of whom have benefited in a meaningfully positive way from the SRO's involvement in their situation. So I think regardless of how this board chooses to proceed, it's not simply listening to the vote or to the population, to the city's vote, or ignoring the city's vote. It's really taking into account all of the other voices that we can't all sit and listen to here tonight.
MJ?
And I guess the other part that I think I have a hard time wrapping my head around is a lot of what we have heard. I feel like people haven't really taken the time to review the MOU that we have. Our MOU is very, I think, well thought out, and it really outlines what the SRO officer can and can't do. And it was actually had a lot of the elements in it that they were suggesting for that failed House bill that happened last year. We've limited his powers. He really can only focus on criminal activity. We have really kept student discipline at the purview of the district. And he's really working in conjunction with all of our counselors and helping our students overall with the teachers, the counselors, the principals to make the students good citizens and excel at good citizenship. And I think that there's still a lot of misunderstanding of what the SRO is doing. He's there to work on criminal activity, and whether the SRO is a position and partially funded by the school or not, that criminal activity is still going to be occurring there. You're just going to have a road officer or patrol officer come to the school who doesn't know the students and isn't trained. I think that's the other part, is that the MOU mandates that the SRO must be trained specifically with dealing with children, which I don't think a lot of other agreements or MOUs in other cities do that. And in New Hampshire, a lot of people are really rethinking and bringing back the SRO because of after COVID, there has been an uptick in criminal activity in the schools just because, the anxieties, the children being out of school and not necessarily remembering how to behave. And at the end of the day, he's trying to keep children out of serious trouble and he's counseling them. So I think we need to focus on that as well.
I just want to echo the training piece, because not all of the street officers are trained to manage the youth. And I think the SRO has gone through extensive training on mediation and de-escalation and managing youth. And then you may have an officer that's just been on the street dealing with adults his whole life, and he's going to come into the situation a little bit different than somebody who knows these kids. At the end of the day, if there's a crime in the school, they're going to call the cops. It does not matter what that is. Your first call is going to be to Lebanon Police Department. So you have a choice to have somebody who knows your school, knows your students, knows your teachers, or somebody who may just have gotten off of a 15-hour shift and needs to come in and deal with a kiddo that maybe isn't behaviorally bad, but is mentally kind of having a struggle.
Lil?
I do want to, I think MJ is correct that we haven't really talked very much about the language of the MOU, which is probably one thing that we didn't go over very much in our last discussion about this, but even looking at our current MOU, it says so far 4 different places, the SRO will serve as a counseling source, will serve as a counselor, will serve as a counselor, will be a counselor. We're working on the triad concept where they are law enforcement officers, counselors, and teachers. And maybe part of the issue is that it's not very clear what that even means, right? At certain points it says they're going to provide resources and it says they're going to counsel. We know that they have gotten extensive training, but as counselors is not one of the ways in which they've been trained. So I feel like it is a little bit, our language is a little bit loose here, and that is problematic, could be problematic. So I think it's true, we do want to look at the MOU in detail and see if this is still what we want it to do, if it's doing what it says we're supposed to be, if what the person is doing right now or what the role is right now is in fact what we want it to do, or does that need to be revised as well?
Did you say not trained in counseling? I'm sorry, I just...
Yeah, not trained in counseling. I mean, trained in de-escalation, but not necessarily in counseling, as far as I can tell from what we heard last year with regard to what their training was.
I'll just jump in. When I read the MOU earlier today in preparation for the meeting, I actually had a question about, towards the end where it talks about quality assurance and evaluation, because I did have in my head, is this officer being evaluated by the district each year, which it seems like he is, or whoever has been doing it, the current person. But it also says on number 8, evaluation, the school district evaluation of the officer is advisory only, and the police department retains the final authority to evaluate the performance of the SRO. The records of this annual evaluation retained at the police department. So I guess I had a question about that in terms of how is an evaluation, it seems like there's 2 different evaluations, and since we're sharing this officer, I know he's a police officer, but he's in the school, so shouldn't actually the school district have equal authority, at least, to the police department in terms of the evaluation? And anyway, I just had questions about that because he is in the school, and
So when we were getting into the conversations was around the same time as the pandemic, and also Chief Mello had retired. I believe he retired. I have not circled back around with the new chief specifically in regard to how we're going to give evaluative input at the end of this year, but that was the thought going forward, to make sure that the SRO would have a piece of the evaluation from the school district perspective, as well as the Lebanon Police Department. They are not an employee of the district. They are an employee of the Lebanon Police Department, of which we fund part of the salary. So as far as personnel files and all of that, it should live with the city. But I know for certain that there's an openness to any kind of evaluation tool that we put together, and that the SRO is open to that feedback.
I just want to say, I can imagine that this conversation continues to be extremely tiresome, not only for the school board, but also for those, that are in the position. And I would love to see, if we make a decision, that we let it kind of play out and see what happens. If we vote to keep the SRO, I would love to see how the social worker and the SRO work together in tandem with each other. If we vote to not keep the SRO, then, I would love to see what turns out there too. I feel like we've done this for a couple years now, over and over and over, and we need to kind of make a decision and stick to it.
The board has a few options. The MOU runs for 3 years from the 18th of February 2020. So it expires on, I guess, the 17th of February 2023, which is what, next year, or what, 9 months from now? 10 months from now? Something like that.
Weird expiration date with the budget.
Yeah, it's the school year.
Well, yeah, it's not for our budget really, because it would, our budget starts in July, so it's I think it looks like it's a little bit more aligned. I think it's a function of when the MOU was first agreed to. But in any event, we've got some options. We can agree. The board can take no action and simply let the MOU continue to run, and then make a decision on reauthorizing it in February of 2023. That's one option. Another option is to and I guess that would basically be an endorsement of the status quo. The other option, and there may be others, but the other option I see is that the board votes to end the MOU. I would think when it expires. I'm not sure if there's there may be a mechanism for backing out of it early, and have to look at the language of it to see. But that would be another option. There may be a third option. I'm not sure. One doesn't occur to me immediately.
So that's a good question, actually, because on number 9, right, of the MOU, it says, this MOU will remain in effect for a 3-year period. At such time, the MOU will be reviewed and revised if necessary. Any modification or termination of this MOU must be mutually agreed upon. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that's between us and the city. So, so if we were to vote to terminate it, then what we would need to have the city approve that? I mean, what does that mean?
Well, as I read it, any modification, it's clear, the modification part is clear. Both parties have to agree to it. I'm not sure that the next sentence is somewhat helpful. It's about the school district not, cutting the line for the SRO out, in which case the MOU is terminated.
So if we cut it from next year's budget, it would automatically be terminated. That's what that next sentence says. That
presumably.
How I read it.
Right.
What I've had very brief conversations about is if the board should decide to not continue the position per this MOU, the position would remain on through December, of which time the city then creates their next budget cycle, which is January through. And then that way, when we do our budget, we would know now if in the fall, we'd be looking for that position to fund it for the following year after, or not. And then in regard to the difference between what we'd be paying for the full year of an SRO position and the crossing guards, Tim and I would be able to figure that out within the budget. And the third option would be that if the board were to approve the SRO, the board could approve that a new MOU be drafted for a period of 3 years, rather than coming right back next year, which would be the 3rd year in a row about this time that we've had the discussion about the SRO. So that's a third possibility.
So Joanne, can you clarify how the crossing guards and the SRO are married to one another in this conversation? Because it feels like they are.
I can try.
Okay.
I think what the city is saying is that the city has taken responsibility for the hiring of the crossing guards and the cost of the crossing guards. Should the school board not move forward with the SRO position, the costs and the responsibility to hire the crossing guards become the responsibility of the school district, but that the city is still willing to do the training for who would be our employees as crossing guards. So we would be posting for them and they would become part of our budget.
So if the board decides to discontinue the SRO, the city has decided to disengage with the crossing guards. Is that how it?
I think that's more a question for the city manager. I don't want to speak for their budget.
Yes, that assumption is correct. If that would allow us to at least reduce some of our shortfall in revenue. So we would transfer that function to the school district at that time. And again, provide the training support, logistical support necessary for you to be able to perform that function. But that function would be a school district function and no longer a city function. So yes.
Got it. So can we talk about that part? Because that, I mean, it feels like they are unrelated, but also related. If we discontinue an SRO, or if we vote at all to do that, we also have this other outlying issue of human resources and crossing guards, and then who does substitution and how we, that seems like it's getting complicated in a way that they're not related to one another. Us deciding, us having a civic vote about whether or not people want to have an SRO in the schools is not related to having crossing guards and having the police manage something that does seem to be very much their jobs, which is the roadway and the safety of people crossing the street. So I don't understand that part. I can see how it would be intimidating or disconcerting to know that by pivoting and maybe making a choice to not have the SRO, that we then are also making a personnel difficulty for the administration in the district for crossing guards, because I know that my kids walked and crossing guards are key, and I don't really see what the two things have to do with one another at all. So that's my question there. And it feels a little bit weird to have those two things together.
I think the way I understood it was that to alleviate, and because they were offering the training and all these other things, that they would fall under them. But I understand them needing to find a way to combat that budgetary loss by saying, okay, well, you know, it's $30,000 essentially that they're going to lose by transferring these. I mean, I've read a lot about law enforcement, and never have I read that it's their duty to guard crosswalks regardless of children or otherwise, or else we would have cops kind of guarding a lot of crossways. So I think it's been like a luxury for us essentially to have an officer that's available and able to cover. And I think they've had knowledge of that prior to as well, right? They're calling out, so they have knowledge of who's going to be there. I don't know that we can look at that as a continuous thing if the police department isn't really being supportive. And sometimes it is the SRO that's doing the crossing guard, depending on where it is. So I see them kind of on the same track, but I see that financial need too. They have to make it somewhere, or else they're covering the cost for every single thing that is to support our kids, right? They're covering that position, they're taking that back, that $30,000, they're gonna eat that, and pay for the crossing guards, and also give up officers when the crossing guards are out. Does that make sense?
Right.
That's how I
totally get what you're.
But I don't understand the conversation, how they got put together somehow. I mean, I understand it.
Lisa, I agree with your, I mean, I see what everybody's saying. It feels to me that the city is turning it into a money issue, and we are talking about it ideologically, and I think in terms of kids' mental health or, you know, needs of the schools, and I think the money issue in the scheme of the budgets is actually fairly small. You know, we've added an social worker, there's been money in the budget for that. Like, I think we're not really as concerned in the scheme of these massive city budgets about the $30,000. It feels a little bit like weird pressure to sort of keep the SRO by linking it to the crossing guard. And I don't want to put, you know, manipulative overtones on anything, but I agree with Lisa that it doesn't feel like it's connected. I get that maybe they're looking for a good way to make up some of the shortfall, but I would like us to not worry about that. I mean, I don't personally know how I'm voting, so that's not my point, but I don't think we should be so worried about the crossing guard issue in the midst of this discussion about the SRO. I would prefer even if we table the SRO and things like that, that it be kind of seen on its own as an issue rather than linked to a kind of $30,000 budget shortfall. Sorry, that's all I wanted to say.
So do we vote? Because the city, I mean, the vote, we've had a vote by the town again, and it seems like we're supposed to do something.
No.
No?
We've got no obligation. It was a non-binding vote. We can, I mean, I agree, there is pressure on the board. The board, and as rightfully so, the board does, should be considering the sentiment expressed at the polls. But, you know, from the time of the deliberative session up until the balloting, you know, it was clear to everyone that this was advisory. You know, we may feel pressure to vote, and perhaps we will, but we're certainly not required to, right?
Do we have a time frame on like this social worker position? If we were to kind of just say we're going to keep the MOU as it is the social worker going to be onboarded so that we have time to see how they work together and how that kind of correlates with one another? I mean, it seems weird to say we're just going to get rid of this position and we have nothing to fill. We have nothing to be supportive of our kiddos in the interim. I mean, we haven't hired somebody yet, and we don't know what that's going to look like. It just seems kind of irresponsible to just say, we're done with it and move forward.
You planning on July 1st?
Yes, we have offered the position with the nomination coming to the next school board meeting. And in my notes, I mentioned that as a way of trying to support staff and students with mental health, I met with our school psychologist and Dr. Chin, who comes in to meet with them often, and got some ideas. And what we put forward as an idea was, when we have these meetings, we should also invite the social worker and the SRO, and possibly our director of ECIA, which is a new position in the district. So it's a group with different roles and responsibilities, but all with a focus on the safety of our students, whatever that umbrella of safety might mean. So that if the position continues, that's one of the things we're thinking about, to bring people together as a support team for staff and students.
So can I just clarify the timing, Joanne? You mentioned earlier that if we vote to discontinue the position tonight, that in fact that would not go into effect until December, because it's a city position and we're talking about their budget year, right? And then if we vote to continue the position, the MOU comes up for review in February. Is that correct? 2 months later, right? So I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Or or the board could decide to say we've had multiple years. Sorry. The board could decide and say we've had multiple years of conversations about this position, and that you're approving this position, and for me to go ahead to create a 3-year contract with them that starts at this point with the comments from this board being put into that MOU.
In December.
Pardon me?
That you would do that in December. It would start in December then, right? Because that's
we could, and then it's running off of a combination of the city's budget timeline, and then Tim and I would just keep our eye on the costs, because our 2 budget cycles are different.
Stephen.
I mean, Kristen, I agree with you that we should be considering this on the ideologic basis, but I think we, as a board, have to realize that every one of our decisions, no matter how theoretical or ideologic or financial, have real financial consequences as well. And some decisions have greater financial consequences and some are more minor, but every decision we make has financial consequences. So I don't think we can consider them in isolation. But certainly the ideologic part, I think, is more important in this case, but not on its own.
Yeah. I do wonder, though, Kristen, you raise a good point. This was never mentioned, this crossing guard trade-off, was never mentioned during our last discussion about this at all. Like, we never discussed about that particular part of it. And so I am interested in the timing of this and the idea of, well, this is going to cause this financial thing, and we never really talked about that. Obviously, we knew if we stopped paying, there was going to be a shortfall because we're paying for half of the salary, but we didn't really talk about this option ever. And we talked about this ad infinitum, so it's interesting that this is now what we're talking about.
I think it's likewise interesting the question was never asked before. I mean, it's come up for 2 years now, let's get rid of the SRO, let's stop paying the money, and no one's ever thought to ask, well, what does that mean on the other side of the equation? Probably good that it's being asked now, so that we have all the information.
Yeah, although I mean, just to follow up on that, I don't actually think the school district is responsible for the number of police officers in the city as a whole. So to Lil's question earlier, that, maybe we're responsible through the this cycle, but, kind of longer term, how big the city grows or shrinks is really not our issue. But beyond that, I also think, I know we've been talking about this at least last year. I don't really remember talking about it the year before, but during COVID. But I don't think it's a bad thing to have these discussions. I think they're helpful discussions. I've learned a lot about what the SRO actually does. So I don't look at them as a negative kind of waste of people's time. I think it's not a bad thing to think about these positions, which are like public and involve a lot of people, and people do have strong opinions on both sides. So it's good to kind of air them in a civil way. My personal opinion would probably be to kind of put this off until February or next winter, because like Renee suggested, I think it would be smart to think about, like, how does the SRO position perhaps change a little bit once there's more social working staff. I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't think we necessarily need to, I think a lot of us are on the fence, so I'm just not sure, for my part, if I would have a really clear decision this evening.
Mary, did you raise your hand?
I did. I'd like to know, before the RSO came to our district, how the crossing guards were paid, because they were there before. And I didn't see any link between the SAU paying for them and the city. That was my only comment about that part of it.
Well, this discussion's been going around the table for a little while now. I'd like to move on. Is there a motion or not?
I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we retain the MOU as it's written and revisit as we get the social worker position in tandem with them to see where we want to go next year. I don't know if that's how it should be worded, but.
Close enough.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second by MJ. I think you had your hand up first. Okay, let's debate the motion. So the motion is to leave the MOU as it stands, not to tonight commit to renewing it.
Correct.
But to allow those 3 months for the to be, was it 3 months? Was that what it would be?
Be like 5. Yeah, 5-ish.
End of August, September, October, November, December. Okay, 5 months.
7.
7, because it goes till February, right?
Right, but we're gonna be revisiting it in December.
That's why I want.
Okay, this was clarification.
Yeah.
Okay.
7 months. I think the clarification is good.
I'm not proposing a friendly amendment.
It's fine. It's fine.
Aaron, you've been awfully quiet.
Yeah, I'm pretty torn on this. I think every student needs to be protected in our schools. So if they have an issue with the SRO, I think we need to do something about that. Not necessarily get rid of the SRO, but modify what we're doing. I think it'd be interesting to see what the SRO and the social worker can do together as a team. I think it would be important to make the SRO more clear, maybe post his trainings that he's been to, so everybody in the community can see how he's been trained, what he's been trained on, so that they're not just thinking it's some rookie cop that doesn't know anything other than police academy. I do think we should revisit this in February and rewrite these MOUs so that they are clearer and help protect those kids that don't want to be around the SRO at school.
Stephen?
I guess my only concern, I agree with Renee's motion in principle, and I think that's where my heart tells me we should go. My only concern is our existing agreement with the city expires mid-February. If we are going to not have a lapse and not have a gap in a plan or a program, it means that we need to be renegotiating, discussing, reviewing, coming up with a new MOU in December, January, which really means that we're going to make all of these decisions based on 3 or 4 months of observing the interaction between the social worker and the SRO. And is that really a fair enough time to let a new program develop and pass judgment on it? And I would argue no. That's my fear.
Is there an option at the end to extend for just a year or 6 months, or does it have to be 3 years? Is there anything that says we have to follow the 3-year model that's been put in place now?
I came in with this already prepared. And then what I mean by that is I don't know the history of it. The city and the school have worked really well together. It wasn't always that way. And I'm proud of the partnership that we have, and I would think that part of Sean being here is listening to the board's perspective. So I would be listening to the police department's perspective as far as negotiating. You just kind of open up the conversations and see where it goes. So did you want to add anything more to that, Sean, about a specific timeline or how that would work from the city perspective?
I think our approach should be whatever you want to do. If you need a shorter period of time, there's nothing that holds us to a 3-year period. I'm guessing when they probably did that, they wanted to have some longevity with the position when they added it. That's no longer a situation for us. So if you need 4 more months or 6 more months, I don't see any reason why we can't work around that at all.
Would you, Renee, consider amending your motion to renegotiating in February of 2024?
Yes, I would love to make that change to the motion.
2023.
No,
No,
that we would
2024.
go,
To give it 15 months instead of 5 months.
so my motion would then be to allow this position to work through February of 2024 to ensure the partnership with the social worker and the SRO position is effective for our students and our community.
Okay, so I have just one part about all of this that is very concerning to me. And what it is I hear all the benefits for the students who appreciate the SRO, and I am very concerned about the students who confide in the SRO without the understanding that they are engaged in a legal interaction that could later affect their futures. And I'm wondering what we're going to do to make it clear to them when they do interact with their counselor, who is also a police officer, that they, in turn, by disclosing certain truths, and depending on how old they are, that they engage in a legal undertaking without really understanding what they're doing. So I remember the first day that the SRO came to the middle school, and both of my kids talked about it. It was something that was remarkable to them and very scary. And I don't know if the kids understand what the difference between a counselor and a police officer is, because there's a big difference. And for all of the benefits that I see having to do with domestic violence, having to do with protecting the child, their physical being, their there's lots of benefits to an officer knowing the children and having interface with the families and being able to protect the child and maybe one of the partners in a domestic violence situation. I still remain very concerned about the children and what they understand having to do with when they're in a communing situation with that police officer, and what the implications for later when they leave high school, what those might be. And so I don't know that it's here in the MOU, because the MOU is very focused on the officer. It's not focused on the students. It's not focused on what the students' rights are inside of the school, interacting with this person as a counselor. And those are my primary concerns. And I feel like the other piece of this that I just cannot make peace with is that we have a voting body that continues to tell us they don't want this. They don't want to pay for it. They keep telling us this. They might have told us this in smaller numbers or larger numbers or protestations or not, but we keep hearing that. And I guess I can't resolve all of this without some kind of, concern. I feel concerned about the fact that we want to kick it down the road again, about the fact that we seem to not be able to make peace with, the primary concerns of the people who keep speaking up, which is that for some kids, it's scary to have that police officer there, and it's real, and it makes an impression. And when it starts in middle school, you can say that we don't need it in the high school, but they've already had 3 years of it in the middle school. And, I don't know what else to say to you about it. It's a real thing. There's kids who have real fear about it, and I know that there's other kids who benefit, and there's real people who have real issues in their homes that the police officer is also helping to protect those people. So I don't know what the answer is, but I don't feel like we've resolved it. The voters keep telling us.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak to the motion?
I would just say that I think adding till February 2024 is a little bit long. Maybe February 23 is a little too short to see some kind of relationship develop or make an assessment, but to add a whole extra year, I think for me is a little too long. So I didn't know if that's the motion. I'm not sure if that motion has been seconded. I'm not sure where we stand at the moment.
Yeah, the motion was seconded.
Okay.
By MJ, I believe. It's either MJ or Mary, you both had your hands up.
No, it was
MJ.
I can second the amendment.
Oh, there was a second.
Vote on it then.
The motion was second.
Okay, if there's no other comment, I wanted to express my own point of view. And I guess some of this comes back to what Lisa was just talking about. It seems to me that eliminating the SRO, kicking the SRO out of the schools, is a rather simplistic approach to a pretty deep-seated problem. I think it's sort of sweeping some larger issues under the carpet. Despite what our Commissioner of Education would have us believe, we have some really serious problems in our communities and our schools with regard to marginalized groups. And I don't think that issue is reasonably addressed by saying, well, let's just get the cop out of the school. We know that there are kids in the schools who, for a variety of reasons, feel uncomfortable and traumatized by the presence of a police officer. And I think that it seems to me that part of our mission as a school district is to help our students mature into productive, functioning citizens of their community. And part of our community is the fact that we have a police force that is responsible for enforcing the laws that lead to an orderly society. And I don't think anyone is proposing we get rid of the police. That's part of our society. And it seems to me that part of what we have to do is to look deeper into this problem and find a broader reaching ways of helping all of the students in our school to understand that situations can change, to understand what has to be done in order to make things more, what's the word I'm looking for? More reasonable, more comfortable for everyone. This is not an easy thing to do. You know, we've taken the first steps. We're hiring a social worker. We're spending 3 times more money on a social worker than we're spending on the SRO. We've taken the first step with an equity audit. We've gotten a certain amount of data there. We've just created a new position in the district. A large chunk of that is directed towards issues of equity and inclusion. And it just seems to me to simply say, okay, get rid of the SRO and we're done, which is what a lot of people will do, I think. You know, mission accomplished, let's move on to somewhere else. I think we need to take a broader view. And the first step to that, I think, is to work with the MOU that we currently have. Start modifying it. We need a little bit of time to do that. Let's get this social worker on the ground. Let's make a serious effort to understand what steps we can take to make a more equitable and welcoming community for everyone. And I don't think we do that by simply saying, get rid of the cop and move on. So that's why I'm going to support the motion. Lil.
I think that you're right. Your assessment of that there are steps that we need to take, and there are multiple steps, and it's a much more complicated problem. I agree. But I also think that getting rid of the SRO can be a first step. And it does not necessarily have to be the only step. And I don't believe that it is the only step for all the reasons that you pointed out. We are moving in a direction of making changes in these areas, but we know already that this position instills fear and discomfort in the same people who we have said in our equity audits and other situations are feeling marginalized in multiple different ways. So I guess I don't see it as being a one and done, as discontinuing the SRO and our conversation is over and we get to move on to other things. I see it as being a step in a multi-step process that we are going to engage in and are already engaging in.
Okay, let's call the question. The motion is to retain the current MOU for a period extending to February of 2024, and to don't let me put words in your mouth, but to instruct through the superintendent to instruct the to-be-hired social worker, director of the new director of equity. What is it?
Equity, curriculum instruction.
Equity, curriculum instruction, and the SRO to work together to see how the MOU and job description might be modified. Do I have that right?
And meet the needs of our kids'
Meet the
health
needs
and
of our
safety,
kids.
yes.
So that's the question. All in favor, signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. The motion carries. Thanks, everyone, for sticking with a rather lengthy and difficult conversation. Next item is discussion and timeline from the city regarding the Seminary Hill property. Mr. Mulholland, we've kept you waiting.
So we do have updated sets of plans with some options in there, and that has been sent to REARC, which is our construction firm that's doing the estimate of the project. Unfortunately, a little bit behind schedule. I won't have the cost numbers until the 6th, which is next Thursday or Friday of next week before I have that. We're hoping to have that this last week. So we're a little bit behind, so we're waiting for that, what those numbers are going to look like, so we can make some further decisions as to what the best options are going to be. But I believe Superintendent has looked at the plans with her staff and are satisfied with the way those were designed. That's, I think, the update where we're at.
Yeah, I looked at the plans with Dana and Tim, and I brought them to Finance and Facilities to have a look, and then the architects came back a week or so, maybe 2 weeks ago, to relook at storage areas and reconfigurations. I wasn't sure if we'd be getting an update to that plan. I haven't shared anything out with the SAU staff yet because I was looking for that, and I just didn't know if I should just use what we had a month or so ago, or if I should be getting an updated draft plan.
I don't have an updated draft plan, so I'm not aware of any of those changes that you speak of in terms of storage.
I think they came in and they were looking at just some of the areas that you couldn't see very well from the walkthrough that we did, but I'd be happy to reach out to them and ask. Thanks.
So the next step, Sean, would be I'm just looking at the timeline chart. The next step is going to be moved out a little bit further, but meet with the board to present costs and draft lease agreement.
Yes, I have.
And some sort of decision from the board to move forward to the next step, negotiating the lease, getting it on a warrant article and so forth.
Yeah, we'll be looking for input from the school board as to what the next steps, if you think there are next steps for us to go in to be able to do that. Dealing with the price issue, as you know, I mean, when the initial concepts that we had a year ago are significantly different today in terms of construction cost. Most of our project costs are going up by 40%. Some of them have actually doubled in some of our city projects, so that presents a whole new dimension that we didn't anticipate prior to the present economic environment that we're in, and we're going to have to deal with that issue.
Any questions? Lil?
I just have a question about timing. So in order for, and warrant articles, right? So the school deliberative session, our deliberative session is in February next year, and you would like us to have a warrant article for that vote, right, in March, giving, what are you looking for from us at that point?
What that warrant article would authorize the school board to enter an agreement with the city in terms of transacting the property and also enter into a lease agreement, long-term lease agreement for the school.
But we would have negotiated the lease agreement. All of that would have been negotiated, like whatever it is that we're entering into, we know what it is because we are completed those negotiations presumably before we do this.
Possibly, what it would give, the voters would give you the authority to act on that. So if they're not necessarily addressed at that particular time, you have the authority to say yes or no later on. It just gives you the authority to transfer. So whether those are accomplished by then, we're going to be our budget process. Our CIP is due on the 13th of May. My budget is due to the council at the end of October. And the council acts on that budget usually, well, this year it'll be December 14th, I think is the date. So that's the date by which they would be appropriating funds for this project.
In October.
No, in December 14th. But the council also has the ability to do a supplemental appropriation, which might be the case, because if we haven't worked out those details at that point, they could do that during the year if they chose to.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at the point in our agenda now where we're going to have a hopefully not too long non-public session. I know the principals have been here, I think, for the SRO and maybe for the other update that Mr. Mulholland just gave us. You guys can probably go home and put your feet up. Could we please have a motion to enter public session, non-public session? Stephen.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we move to a non-public meeting under the terms of RSA 91A.3.2, Section C.
Okay, we'll do a roll call, starting with Mary.
Oh, do I have to, someone have to second the motion?
Oh, yeah,
I'll
second. I'm sorry, I'm too anxious here.
Yes.
Moved by Stephen, second by MJ. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Does the time that we do start now or when we get in the building? The time now?
Yes.
Yes.
I had to think for a minute there.
Ann, did you have anything? All right, we should be able to knock this out. Tim, I wasn't going to say too much about the
Pop-Tarts going on over there?
assurances. You said that they're in there, and that we bring them annually. And I'm signing off. Richard, I'm going to have you sign off.
I was looking at that Dunkin' cup and thinking,
Yeah.
that looks really good.
Yeah.
I got a pen here somewhere. Anywhere at all?
Oh, there's a little dash line at the start.
Does the middle school have one? I never.
No, which is the problem. They took anything from the school, even though there's like terrible intersections on the bottom. They're just like, tough crap, everyone take your chances, taking the left turn. Well, we live on the other side, so I get to go like up the hill, in and out, like, thank God, because we did that for like 7 years, because we live 5 minutes away, and we never had to
We all back?
fight that left turn, because I usually would go.
Yes, just Renee's gone, so I think,
Right.
yes, the rest of us are here.
You can do that if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll do this at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, let's,
Yeah, my husband would do that.
let's pick up where we left off. We have discussion and action, grant general assurances. Tim, is this your thing?
It's actually mine.
Oh, okay, Joanne, is this
It's
your
okay.
thing?
Well, we'll team it together, Tim. So every year we bring the grant assurances forward. It allows us to receive federal and state funding. And if the actual assurances are rather lengthy, they're in your board packet. But legally, we have to bring them forward to the board so that you know and are aware of the steps that we have to follow. It has to be in the board packet. It has to be in the minutes. And then Shay takes this and says the board received these, and we are then able to get funds. I've signed off on the insurances, and Richard will be doing that as well this evening. Any other thing I need to mention, Tim, or?
The only other thing I'd like to say, if you're wondering like about compliance, this is part of, a big part of what our audit is about. The auditors are very familiar with grant rules and regulations, and we get audited about our compliance to these assurances.
There's no vote or anything, it's just for the minutes.
And do we need to sign anything? Wasn't there something in there about,
The school
or
board,
just?
the superintendent and the school board chair.
So is that the action that's listed? Is that the signatures occur?
Do we need to vote on this, on anything? Is there a motion?
Tim, do they need to do a vote, or, I don't think so. I don't think you need to, I think we just put it as a DNA. So it's a discussion so that it's in the minutes, and for them to know that I'm signing off on them, as are you.
Okay, so that part is done then, and I'll do my thing when we're done. People don't have to sit here and watch me initial pages. Okay, I asked for a discussion item to be put on regarding board goals, and I sent out a short email a few days ago about this because Joanne's going to be coming with a draft of the strategic plan very soon for us to talk about, to pick apart, to make suggestions, and ultimately to approve. But I mean, we're all the board goals are related in that the board goals need to be aligned with with what the district plans are for the coming years. So I sent out kind of a last year's goals and just some bullet points for what we might consider for goals for the coming year. And some of them seem, I don't know if you still have that or not, but the sections from previous years was on finance. You have the budget, we have 3 contracts. Those are things that, yes, they have to be done, but it's going to consume a significant amount of our time and effort, so I thought it was worth putting us considering as a goal. Strategic plan we need to discuss and approve. We have another topic under facilities and capital improvements. We've got 3 construction projects going on that while we have professionals that monitor that, ultimately the expenditure of funds is our responsibility. And so that's something we're going to need to spend some time on, as well as the track reconstruction and the Sem Hill property. And these are just some general topics I have thrown out, and I'm interested in if anyone has thought about these or anything else that you'd like to see for us to consider. Under climate and culture, we've got the equity audit results in hand. It seems that we have as many questions as we have answers, but we certainly can do more of a deeper dive into that and see if there are actionable items that should be part of the strategic plan, and things that we can do in the next 6 months or the next year or 3 years. The role of, ultimately the board needs to sign off on the role of the ECIA. And I think that's something that we're going to have to work with Lisa on and make sure that what she's working on aligns with what we see as important for the district. And again, that links to the strategic plan. A couple new topics we haven't talked about before, but based on previous comments from board members over the last 9 or 10 months, community communications is perhaps something we might want to consider the board taking a more formal role in. And I know that the resources of the district are at our disposal if we want to regularly communicate in various ways with our constituents and with the school community and the city at large. As well as, I'm sorry that Renee is not here, but relations with state and city officials. This has been a pretty hot year politically, and I know that's something that Renee has indicated she's interested in sort of tracking some of these legislative initiatives for us, so that if we want to weigh in with our reps or make some sort of public stance, we're not sort of forced into it at the last minute by an email from the New Hampshire School Board Association saying this is coming up tomorrow. So anyway, I just wanted to have this on as a discussion item tonight, and to find out if there's anything that people want to see included in our goals. I'll continue to update this. We can have a more in-depth discussion towards the end of the year. And I think this will also help inform Joanne with the strategic plan. Lil.
I have a question actually about the strategic plan process, because I feel like, and we did this last year, I feel like it's strange that the strategic plan is being developed and then it's going to be presented to us and we're going to say yay or nay. It feels odd that we are not, or at least a board member of some kind is not more involved in that process of deciding on the strategic plan before it comes to us, right? It feels like if we want to have, it feels like our input is not all that meaningful if we're just saying, yes, that looks great, or no. I feel like that we need to be involved. It would maybe behoove us as a district and as a board to have been involved in that process more thoroughly than just yes or no, I guess.
Sorry, but didn't we last time have a public roundtable discussion where board members also went to different tables with the different members of SALT and community members, and we discussed and vetted the strategic plan before it came to the board? Because
we did that a few years ago. The difficulty that we're facing is that with the equity audit, it pushed us way back as far as time. So I spent a lot of hours today drafting a strategic plan along with getting input from SALT. Tomorrow is the first day that we'll be looking at the strategic plan because we've been pulled into so many other directions. I spent over an hour talking with Deo as far as the draft that we had, and he provided some input and some tweaks, some ideas. So my timeline is to get it to the board by May 28th. So I have I have 2 SALT meetings because Deo can't attend the SALT meeting until May 12th. I need to get it to the teachers and to the community for a week, and then I bring it to the board on May 28th. So if on May 28th the board wants to do a community input, that's fine. Is then my expectation to pull it all together by the end of the school year in June. Your last board meeting is, the first meeting in June, so it's doable if the May 28th meeting, we start at 5:30 or 6. We've had pizza in the past. We could set up the tables. There's 3 main buckets this year. And if the board would like to do that on, is that right? What's May 28th?
May 28th is a Saturday.
Sorry. Let's not do that on a Saturday. So I know May 12th is when Deo is coming.
That's a Thursday.
Yep, that's at SALT. Could you please let me know the 2 board meetings?
It would be the 11th and the 25th are the second.
So it'd have to be the 25th. So, that had been my goal to do a community forum. We are seeing COVID begin to increase again. I don't want to do it via Zoom. I just think that that's just too hard. But we could definitely do masks optional. We could start it at 5:30. I could do a Google Doc that's like how many people from your family are coming. We can order pizzas and salad and stuff, and we could do that from 5:30 to 6:30. And we would have the sticky notes kind of thing. And then I could take that back to SALT. And then, sorry, that was May 24th.
May 25th. How often is SALT? Is it every Thursday or is it every other?
Every other.
So then your next SALT would be that very next day. Your next SALT would be the 26th if it's every other Thursday because you had one on the 12th.
But I could bring the final, what we would call the final, which would be post-community gathering, to the retreat. So along with approving the strategic plan, you'd be approving your board goals at the same meeting. And we could definitely do that because you would have had a chance to vet it through the community. I would have had a chance to send it out to the staff beforehand. And I think we could do that. So I could do a community forum May 24th. Is that what we said?
25th.
25th?
Lil, was your idea, are you advocating, or were you advocating for community involvement, or were you advocating, or in addition to that, were you advocating for board involvement during the development phases of the strategic plan?
Right, so both things. I think I like this as far as having community involvement and also board involvement because we can participate in the sticky note of it all. But, and maybe not, this is the other issue. It's like because we have this super shortened timeline, that's problematic. But I think going forward, I think I am advocating for more board involvement in developing the plan going forward because I do think that if we're setting the tone, which is what we're supposed to be doing, right, then it would be helpful to sort of have that input all along, right, instead of just in one fell swoop. But at this point, for this thing, I think given your timeline and given the restrictions, I think what you've just outlined is good. And you said that you're thinking about having the text of it available the week before that meeting so that people can read it and then come prepared to talk about it at the sticky note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we months ago looked at our current strategic plan and we started to be like, what do we want to keep? What do we not want to keep? We had breaks in between, which ended hitting some of the normal Thursdays. And we thought it was really important to spend an entire SALT meeting with Homeland Security looking at our emergency response procedures. So that wiped out that time. So I've been sharing it with SALT electronically, but tomorrow is the first time that we're really sitting down and going, okay, this is all the pasta that we tossed against the wall, boom. What do you think about these buckets? So it wouldn't have been appropriate to have board involvement because we didn't even have ourselves looking at it until tomorrow.
Right. So I'm
And
talking
then
about in the
we were
future.
cramming it, like my original thought was longer because we were supposed to get the survey done by November with all the feedback by January.
Yeah.
But I'm committed to getting stakeholder input, and we can plan the May 25th, and I can try to get it out in the draft form before that meeting as best as I can.
Yeah.
And there's 3 buckets, and we could have the table set up, and I can do the timer and organize it that way. And then take that feedback from the 25th, and then bring it to the board meeting, which is the second meeting in June, which is
The 8th.
8th. Just didn't want to not have a plan approved and start a school year off because we use those as our goals and professional development kind of key factors.
No, I think that's a great timeline given the restrictions that happened this year. I guess, and again, this is a 3-year plan, right? Or is it right?
Right.
So then my second the thing I'm advocating for doesn't come into effect for 3 years or 2 years. But then when we're starting that process earlier, then I think at that point having people weigh in, because when you're doing the buckets of, well, what do we want to keep and what do we want to lose? That's a good point also to have a board representative say, you know, this is something that we feel like we're still needing to address or not addressing or whatever, and that would just sort of help guide this, so it just facilitates the process. That's all.
Yep, makes sense.
And do we have a date for the board retreat? You mentioned that. I wasn't sure.
It's the last board meeting. It's June 8th.
Okay, so that's not going to be a normal board meeting. That'll be a retreat.
That tends to be the first meeting in June tends to be the board retreat.
Yeah, we'll use that to focus on goals and strategic plan.
So Dick, are you wanting us to look at these and then sort of give you ideas?
That would be great.
Right now, or
No,
between
no,
now and-
if you have it right now, that's
Right,
fine. I'm making notes, but in the interest of,
Right.
it's past 9 o'clock, you know, feel free to pass it along, and maybe I'll set this up as a Google Doc for people to contribute. That would be really, yeah. In fact, I will definitely do that. I'll set it up as a Google Doc so that people can make contributions, and we're not trying to do all of this in June or on May, whenever we're looking at it. Okay. Moving right along then. Discussion and action. We need to accept the $29,000 donation from Tris Wykes for Lebanon High School varsity softball field construction of batting cages.
I move to accept accept the $29,000 donation from Tris Wykes for the LHS varsity softball field construction.
Motion by Lil, second by Stephen. Kristen?
I was just going to vote already.
Oh.
We're so ready to vote.
Calm down, guys. We'll go as fast as we can. Tris came and spoke to Finance and Facilities several months ago. This is a really great thing that he's doing. It's something that evidently that his dad was interested in supporting Lebanon school kids, and Tris thought this was a great way to do it, a need that he saw, and we are most grateful for that. So, vote all in favor? Unanimous, 8-0. We also need to acknowledge, no vote required on this, acknowledge a $600 donation from Cassian Wykes for Lebanon High School softball jackets. Thanks very much. I haven't seen them, but I'm sure they're.
Is it a distinction between a need for acknowledgement and a need for a vote?
It's a
based on
dollar.
amount?
It's a dollar amount. Yeah. So the board gratefully acknowledges the donation for the jackets. Thank you. We also are acknowledging a $1,000 donation from Vital Communities, Upper Valley Teaching Place Collaborative mini grant for the Hanover Street School Garden. Again, we are most grateful for this very generous support for something that I think people really appreciate and has been getting some very nice press coverage in recent years. So thanks very much to Vital Communities. Also acknowledging a $500 donation. Oops,
I think that just got.
I just did that. I guess there's no more money to acknowledge.
No, there's two.
There's two.
There are two Vital Communities.
Oh, yes, there is. Yes, there is. Now, it's a $500 donation for Vital Communities Upper Valley Farm to School Network mini grant for the high school, for the HSS garden as well.
So I think those, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Tim and Joanne, but I think those are under, Maggie MacArthur McKay is the one who is applying for those grants, and she's doing a really great job of managing that garden program and working with they eat the food in the cafeteria, they cook with the potatoes
Right.
they raise, and they cook with the carrots, so she's doing an excellent job, and she's really grown it kind of on her own, so I just want to acknowledge her hard work.
Special thanks to her, because this money doesn't necessarily just materialize in a basket. Thank you. Thank you very much to all concerned. Okay, we have some first reading of policies to do. And let me get my notes here. Again, these are first reads, so there's no vote required. Policy JLCB, immunization of students. This is a recommended policy and a revision, extensively rewritten by New Hampshire School Board Association, and Policy Committee voted to accept it and bring it to the board for first read. It's in your packet. Are there any corrections? I'm trying not to look at Lil. Are there any corrections at this first? This is a nice stage at which to make corrections.
I have no corrections at this stage because I haven't read them all yet.
That's the only reason.
That's the only reason.
This is a historic moment.
Because we don't even accept them until we get to the second stage anyway, so we'll just wait.
Yeah.
And the second first read is for policy JLCC, head lice pediculosis, revised. These are updates from New Hampshire School Board Association to comply with legislative provisions. And the Policy Committee on, was it April 7th, I think, voted to bring it to the board for first read. Yes.
So
MJ.
I'm going to embrace my inner Lil on this one. And because I was on the policy committee when we adopted this the last time, so it's near and dear to my heart. In the top paragraph, it says that students should not be excluded from school for having nits or head lice.
What?
But then, under the criteria for return to school, it says that they can't come if they have live lice until they've had a treatment. So I'm a little confused why we're not excluding them, but then in the last paragraph, we are excluding them. Seems like we need to reconcile that.
Let me check with the nurses on that, because they really are right on it. They did take a look at the policies before they came through, but we all might have just missed what it says one thing in one paragraph and not in the other, so.
Do you have a markup you can send us?
Thank you for bringing that.
I do. Well, it looks like that it's in the yellow section, so it would be new that they can't be excluded. And then in the last paragraph, that's not in yellow, so I think that's old language. So I think that the New Hampshire School Association just didn't reconcile the two, maybe?
Yeah, it looks like the yellow supersedes the old language, and that last paragraph needs to be just deleted, because if they are not being excluded from school, then there is no criteria for returning to school.
So the recommendation would be to delete the paragraph entitling criteria for return to school?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Or, well, I'm not sure if you want to, I think you need to consult with the nurse, because it talks about using anti-parasitic treatment, so you might want to work that in somewhere in the paragraph and not, so there might be some nuggets in there that we want to keep, but not the exclusion.
So we'll lob this back in the nurse's court. Gotcha.
Net nuggets.
Okay. Anything else on JLCC? Okay. Under unfinished business, discussion and action, the third read of JLCA, physical examination of students.
Yep.
And Joanne, I'm going to rely on you
Sure.
to reorient us here.
Yes. There was a question about our nurses and the follow-up with DCYF, so I sent an email out after the board meeting, and I received this response. We do not have a PA, NP, MD associated specifically with the school. Should I see a child who I feel should be evaluated by a medical provider, dental, chronic headaches, other chronic concerns, I contact the family and make my recommendations. I provide resources if needed. I then follow up with the family to make sure the care has been provided. Should the family not follow through, then a call to DCYF would be another step due to medical neglect. So I hope that answers the question. There was language in here about the steps, which is why we asked it for it to come back, I believe.
That's right. That's why we tabled it, because of the questions.
Right, so then this is under D, is that's the part that we were talking about, under section D. So it says that if every child presents with a problem and the nurse deems to require further evaluation, they may be referred to the school nurse, and then with the consent of the principal, the parents or guardian of said child, they can prescribe them an examination. This is the sentence that I still have problems with. If the parents fail or neglect to have said child so examined and fail to present the recommendations from said examiner within a reasonable period after the referral by the school, then said child may be examined by a qualified health care provider. So they ask the parents to have the child examined by a doctor. The parents don't. Then what happens? That's still the same.
That was the question that came up last time.
That's the question, right? And so I don't think
answer.
we've resolved that. I don't think we've answered that question.
Yeah, according to this, that they continue to provide the resources, and then if the resources aren't taken, then they would call DCYF. So for our district,
So then we need to
then
say
the child maybe we might want to strike that part out, and because it's not a step that we're doing.
Our district does not, on our own, send a
Examine.
child to be examined by someone.
Correct. We recommend.
All right.
So then maybe what we want to do is just take off the part of the sentence that says, said child may be examined by a healthcare provider, and instead it would just say, within a reasonable period after the referral by the school, comma, in significant cases, comma, the matter may be responded. That's what we do. So we just take out that part about said child may be examined, because we're not doing that. That's not our policy. That's not our practice. And instead, if there is a significant case, the next step is going to be referral to DCYF.
Would you mind emailing that to me,
Yes.
and then I can give it to Lori?
Yeah.
And we'll make the motion based on that language, and then we won't bring it back another time. But thank you for bringing that point forward.
Okay, then can we have a motion then to accept JLCA as modified?
I'll make a motion to accept JLCA as modified.
Motion by Lil, seconded by Mary.
Kristen wants to second it.
Yeah, she does.
Second by Kristen.
By Chris, I'm sorry, Kristen. All in favor? 8-0, unanimous. I thought we had forgotten you. Leadership team updates. You haven't forgotten. Superintendent update.
Sure. I'm going to go briefly through mine because you have copies of it. We are continuing with our renovation projects. We talked a lot about strategic plan this evening. In regard to we talked about that the social worker nomination will be going forward. I wanted to mention that we are receiving a lot of interest in Lebanon School District positions, especially classroom teachers. We followed up on personnel matters and student matters. We had our SALT meeting, and then I talked about meeting with Dr. Chin a bit earlier, and Lisa to talk about math. I did attend the senior tea at the Carter House and the presentation at the Elks. The LHS has now been signed, so it's all good to go. I sent it to Xavier to post on the website, Tim. Responded to the Valley News inquiries, and we had a write-in for the district clerk position. So I called that person, and I need to call him back to talk about the responsibilities and if the person is going to take that position. If not, the board can appoint somebody to be the district clerk. So that's where we are with that. And the assurances are in the packet. I also, for board and community information, did the op-ed from Mr. Edelblut and a response to it, so people are aware of conversations going on with public education in New Hampshire.
Does the, yeah, go ahead, MJ.
Oh, I just want to know, who is Dr. Chin?
So Ray Chin is a well-known therapist in the Upper Valley. I've worked with him myself for 20 plus years, and he comes into our school, works with our students and staff, and he also was the person I said we would meet with, the school psychologist, the social worker, director of ECIA, and the SRO, under the umbrella of student and staff safety.
So he's a paid consultant then, basically to the school district.
Yeah, he's out of Deer Creek. I'm hesitating because I never remember if he's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but he is a well-known practitioner in those fields.
Stephen.
Joanne, I just wanted to mention something or touch on something that you included in your, appropriately, in your summary, just didn't mention it here tonight, and that was the rising COVID cases in our county. And just for everyone's information, as you all know, that this is an ongoing issue and numbers are climbing quickly. The CDC on their website and even New Hampshire's DHHS on their website, where they tend to downplay things, both sites clearly demonstrate that case counts and case positivity and hospitalizations in our county are at all-time highs, and they're in the highest risk category right now. I know we have chosen to align our behavior with DHHS guidelines, which some would argue perhaps are politicized, but we should know that we are not, that those guidelines conflict with CDC guidelines right now that say that if your county's risk category is in the highest level, which we are, the recommendation is masking indoors for all people regardless of vaccination status. So just so that you are aware that that there is that conflict.
On another, go ahead, Kristen.
Just, thank you for that. This has nothing to do with that. I just wanted to point out that I saw the U.S. News World Report listings came out yesterday for high schools. Did you see that?
Yes.
And Leb was number 7 in New Hampshire. So Hanover number 3, including, I think, charter schools. So, yeah, kudos to LHS. Ian's not here anymore, but I thought that was a pretty good stat.
It is a good stat. We go back and forth with sharing it because you're number 7 one year and number 10 the next, and you kind of wonder, people go, well, where were you? Like, what happened that year too? We're very proud of that incredible amount of hard work. The U.S. World Reports base it on AP tests. And so it's interesting because it can be connected with the affluence of the parents of the children, and if they have taken the AP tests, and if students are planning to go to a 4-year school, they're more apt to take AP tests than others. What I find striking and really something to celebrate is the diversity of the Lebanon school district compared to some of the other school districts, and that so many of our students are part of the conversation and opening the doors, whether it be taking the PSATs, the SATs, or the APs. And I agree with you, that's a huge accomplishment, and we've been watching that rise over the years. We are definitely a district that provides a lot of opportunities, and what I've seen over the last 8 years is we're highly competitive, that we are not second or third or fourth when people come to move to the Upper Valley, but we're definitely looked at as, hey, this is a great school for my child to attend. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
I hope that gets reflected in the minutes. I'll just say that for the purposes of the transcript. I think it's worth acknowledging, as well as Stephen's comment. I wanted also to just see if if anyone wanted, wanted to comment or weigh in at all on the op-ed piece from from our Commissioner of Education and the other information that was passed around. Speaking for myself, I'm very disturbed by this. I think that his words and his position do not align with the values of this school district at any rate. I mean, the commissioner knows full well that that parents are given every opportunity to opt out of anything they find objectionable for their children to be exposed to, and then to lay this at the doorstep of teachers or administrators is not only unfair, but not really appropriate. And I think we need to move, as we have been moving, to a higher degree of inclusivity, not going in the other direction. But that's just me speaking as one board member.
I'll just echo that super briefly in the interest of time. I do follow this a lot because I'm actually very interested in this issue. I was alarmed by the op-ed. I think it's very unprofessional for somebody in his position to share like random screenshots of Post-it notes and various things from the school which were in his like supporting evidence. I also found his op-ed frankly embarrassing because it was so badly written and badly argued for someone who's the head of education. So I know we don't want to antagonize anyone. I think we're all like very supportive of our teachers. I think the curriculum is great. As far as I know, I don't know if there's anything we should do publicly or we should just kind of ignore some of that inflammatory language and just keep doing what we're doing and keep supporting our schools, teaching all the great stuff that they do. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen in the next election and how long he's going to remain the education director, but my personal feeling might be to just keep supporting our schools and not, I don't know, not say anything publicly. Yeah.
I think from my perspective, I think that the position that the commissioner took is actually sort of the most, is an example of the exact opposite of the purpose of education writ large. I think, if anything, the purpose of education, specifically public school education in the United States, is to expose our students to views outside of those that are in their house. And that does not mean that we then advocate particular positions or anything beyond educating people, which is having you question what it is that you already know and building on what you already know. And so I found the tone extremely dismissive and extremely anti-education, which I think is an ironic position for him to take. And I do feel like, as Kristen said, we want to continue to support our teachers as much as we can, given the fact that there is legislation right now that would like to silence what our teachers can do. And so I am grateful for our teachers for any amount of teaching that they are doing in this climate, because it is a very silencing climate. And I'm glad that the board is supporting them in their efforts to continue to educate.
Thank you. Business Administrator update. Can we get another microphone for the next meeting, whoever?
Yeah, this one is, and I just know that there's no cord on this and I couldn't hook it up quickly. In your packet is a report. I went through April 15th attempting to get through the last day of the soft closing of POs on April 15th. I don't usually go mid-month, but I thought it would be helpful. But as I look at some of the POs that have come out have had to be done since then, it was certainly soft. So these numbers will change, are ratcheting down more. But We're about 94% expended this through April 15th. Last year at the end of April, we were 96% expended. So we're behind where I would like to have us be. And some of it is COVID related, not all of it, but some of it is COVID related. For example, we budgeted for increased COVID supplies, custodial cleaning and stuff, and we haven't gone through what we haven't had to use a lot of that budget, so that's probably about $60,000. Probably something that's kind of a little more hidden is that we didn't do a lot of curriculum work last summer, and I count this as COVID, but maybe it's just sort of economy based. We budgeted for $30,000 for summer help for custodians last summer. We got one person. So we didn't spend hardly any of that money. So those sort of things are in the budget, and we were really scrambling last year to clean our buildings. This year so far, we have 2 applicants. I guess I make a public plea we usually hire high schoolers. They don't have to be from Lebanon, but they have been in the past, and we budget for up to 10. Last year we had 1. So far this year we have 2 that have filled out an application. So if you have a child or a friend of a child who's looking for some summer work, I highly encourage them to apply. We need help. We're still short custodians, 2. So a lot of this money, $58,000 of custodial wages wasn't spent this year. We saved $60,000 in that assistant principal Mount Leb position, or the principal position, however you want to call it. We're down an administrator there this year. Some other things, bus driver wages there's a lot of bus driver wages remaining, and I'm just bringing that up to say that I really scrubbed with Paula what we've budgeted for versus what we need, and we've already reduced the budget for wages next year, not because they're getting less money, but we're just carrying some positions that I guess they would be great in the ideal world, but we don't need them to do what we need to do, and we don't have those positions anyway, so we already ratcheted that down. On top of that, there's healthcare savings, about $400,000. Teacher retirement, meaning what we budget for people to go to NHRS, about $230,000. So if we hire people at a less rate than we budgeted for, obviously all the benefits to go with that is based off the salary. So if you hire someone at $20,000 less, obviously we're paying less retirement, FICA, all that other stuff. So that's how that compounds a little bit. Tuition, $114,000 less than budgeted, which is pretty good actually. We've had, usually we're over on special ed tuition, and this year we're pretty much right on. So, and then a few things that are still going to change. For example, there's a few encumbrances that have to happen at the end of the year. For example, the SRO bill, I encumbered that since this report. Teacher professional development and paraprofessional development, there's still money left in those budgets, and there's a whole process in place as to when you can ask for basically the pot's broken up into thirds, and if there's any money left at the end of April, then the remaining money gets divvied up among people who apply for it. So that process happens in May and even early June. So some of those numbers will come down. All in all, based on my experience, I suspect that the balance will be somewhere around $2.5 million before we start talking about end of year projects. So that's just you'll get another update here when April finishes, obviously, but that's my report as of now. Any questions?
Lisa?
I just have a question about the wages for the custodian positions for kids, because all over the Upper Valley, everybody's raising their hourly rate to try and get, I was just wondering what.
So when we budget it, we budget 10 positions, I think at $11 an hour. But that, recognizing that's low, and recognizing that last year we got 1, we need to make sure we stay below the regular staff. So we're confident we can offer probably $15 an hour, but we're not going to hire 10, so we won't go over budget. We're so far away from 10 that I think we can do that. If we get 5 or 6, that'll be better than we've had in the last several years. So I think our wages are kind of competitive. I know I have a teenager, and I know you can get $17 an hour at Home Depot. But the school is Monday to Friday, and we're parents, well, not that anybody else. So anyway, we know people go on vacations. We know that people go somewhere else. So like, unlike other jobs, there's no weekends, and we're very easy to work with because the people who are in charge are parents.
Are there age limitations?
In New Hampshire, you have to have working papers if you're 15. So we will hire 15-year-olds with working papers that I understand you get from the high school office, but we're not going younger than 15, I don't think.
So 15's pretty good for a 15-year-old.
Yeah, I think. It's hard work. I mean, you'll be lifting tables. You don't do anything tough, but as far as you're not up on ladders and stuff, but you're moving furniture out of rooms and moving furniture back in rooms. You're dusting. You're doing all kinds of sort of the heavy stuff we do during the summer. And our custodians will, when you move the furniture out, then the custodians will do all the floors and the stripping and stuff. So you don't do anything that you need special skills for or especially dangerous. But you'll be working 8 hours a day. Full-time during the summer. Yeah. But, you have soccer camp, for example, and you need to leave at 2 because soccer starts. We work around that stuff, so.
Anything else for Tim? MJ?
No, that comes out of, when we do that, we take it out of their actual wage line. So everybody in the payroll system, you're assigned an account number based on what you do. And if you get to $4 an hour, we process the timesheet, it'll just plus up what you get off that same line. The things come out of subs line are actual regular subs, or if we have a long-term sub, you'll see it come out of that line.
Just about bus drivers, and you kind of said this, but I think I didn't totally get it. So you budgeted a little too much, and then we haven't used it because like field trips and this and that, everything's been down. And one final question, I know that with athletics, it was actually difficult to have enough bus drivers. So do we think that next year it's gonna be a better situation? And you need that money in the budget?
No, that's a good question. So what I did is, I run a spreadsheet that I inherited. It's been around for a while, a spreadsheet. And when someone comes in new, I put the new person in. For the bus drivers at the bottom, there's basically just position names, basically. I try to plug names in there, but I haven't done as good of a job of, because the turnover hasn't been as good. And so if there's been, if I inherited 15 people, for example, that's what we budgeted for. And then, so what I did this year is, we are short bus drivers, but I sat down with Paula and said, if we had everybody we needed to run all of our trips, how many people we would need? And it still allowed me to reduce a couple positions out of that spreadsheet. So, but we don't have everybody we need. So we're still looking for bus drivers. If you have kids doing spring sports, that we've had to reschedule things or get creative. And that's really because everybody wants to play sports at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and we have enough drivers to run our regular routes at 3 o'clock and a couple others. But some sports need 2 buses, and there'll be 3 sports, and suddenly you need 6 drivers, and I don't have 6 drivers. So. But when I said I adjusted it, it wasn't to reduce to the lowest number we have now. It's just to right size what we put in the budget every year based on what we need to operate fully staffed.
Anything else for Tim? As the budget Grinch does need to speak up. We're looking at, you're estimating we may be looking at a $2.5 million unexpended fund balance. And
right.
Before anyone starts doing this, thinking about end of year spending, and which we're going to have to talk about this, before we break for the summer. Let's keep in mind that anything that this is money we collected by taxation, and anything that we don't spend goes right back to the people who paid it in the first place in the form of tax relief against next year's taxes. So let's
also remember that there's already built into the budget that the voters approved, and the tax rate that we had published with it was assuming $1 million to go back.
Yep.
And then another warrant article passed for $600,000 to go into to put money into the capital reserve.
But there will be bucks left over.
Yeah.
Even when those obligations fulfill. So. Okay, we'll move on. Before we get into committee updates, I do have to ask all of you to help us out a little bit with a couple of our committees. As you know, we delegate a lot of work down to the committees, and we have some trouble lately with committee meetings having to be scheduled. I think it's a couple committees, at least one hasn't met for a while. Anyway, we all understand, we take on certain obligations when we join the board, but we also understand that people have lives to live and things happen. But what I would ask is when these committees do meet, please think about, make sure that time is a time that works for everyone, that you have a possibility of a consistently meeting. And if it needs to be adjusted, adjust it, keeping mindful of the fact that our administrators have lives as well and don't necessarily want to meet at 7 in the evening. Please let's try to keep these committees meeting on a regular basis, because as I say, we do delegate a lot of authority to those committees. And also, if you everyone, it would help out to look ahead a little bit, and if you know there's going to be a problem a week, 2 weeks, a month down the line, let the committee chair know, because we can get people to step in. I mean, these committees aren't written in stone, and if we know a week in advance that board member X can't make a meeting, then we can get someone else to stand in. We're limited to 4, because if we have any more than 4 people voting on a committee, showing up and voting, then we've got a board majority. So it's kind of and less than 3, you can't do anything. So it's important to try to keep these meetings going. So that being said, Finance and Facilities met on April the 7th. I think, Aaron, is there anything to be reported out on that we haven't already heard?
No, I think we've covered all of it.
Okay. Next meeting is May 5th, 4 p.m. at the SAU office. Policy met April 7th. You saw the results of that today. Next meeting is Thursday, May 12th at 8:30 a.m. Education Committee next meets Monday, May 2nd at 4 in the afternoon, and then again on May 16th at 4 p.m. in the SAU office. Personnel and Negotiations has a Zoom meeting in preparation for negotiations at 10 a.m. on May 4th. Student Wellness Advisory Committee meets also on May 4th, 3:15 in the SAU office. Howard Area Career Technical Center, next meeting is May 3rd. Wow, the first week of May is busy, 10 a.m. Area Committee, May 24th at Grantham Village School. Joint Task Force next meets on May 19th at 6 p.m. at City Hall. And the next track fundraising committee meeting is a week from yesterday. So that's May, whenever that, Monday, May 2nd, May 3rd. I think it's May 3rd.
The Tuesday is May 3rd, yes.
Yeah, okay, so it'll be Tuesday, May 3rd in the library in this building. All are welcome to join. By way of an update for that committee, we've done some outreach to some of the media outlets, and Lebanon Times is going to be coming to our next meeting to do a nice write-up. We have quite a few grants in progress. We got $25,000 in from the Byrne Foundation, which we're very grateful for. Members of the committee have so far committed $15,000 themselves as a form of leadership gifts. And we have other grants out to some of the larger foundations. Plans are made to be well before the end of the school year to start more of the grassroots efforts. And we'll be, I may get Brooke Herndon to come to our next meeting to keep everyone apprised as to what's going on. But we're making, I think, making progress, and we're about where we want to be at this point. And my understanding is the track project itself is on track for groundbreaking the beginning of June. Future agenda items, board member recommendations or questions. It is my happy duty to invite you all to participate in the homecoming parade. I think it's on Saturday, June 11th. I got an email a little while ago from the, who was it from? Hang on a second. I closed it, but from Mr. Muzzy, who's organizing the parade. And I said, well, how many? I'm not sure what time it is. It's generally like 9 in the morning or something like that. And in the past, I asked him, how many people can you accommodate? He said, however many we want, just let him know. What they typically do is trot out a bunch of antique cars for people to ride in. In the past, I've done it with my grandson, and little kids get a kick out of it. Teenagers would rather be seen dead than to be in the car with you waving at their friends. But little kids seem to get a kick out of it. So anyone who is inclined to do that, it's Saturday, the 11th of June, and it's a good time. It's about an hour and a half of your day. Important dates. Next board meeting is Wednesday, May 11th, here. I don't believe there's any other business. Stephen?
I was going to make a motion when you're done.
Are there any other motions?
Motion to adjourn.
Second by Mary. All in favor? 8-0, unanimous. Let's go home.
Recording stopped.
That was maybe the longest one ever.
I keep forgetting the role that you play, Stephen.
Oh, that's the problem.